I start every book with a problem. But this is not a book, this is a book tour. So I decided tonight, you have a problem. Tonight I'll be judging you. You know what I know about book people? Lots of introverts. Do you know what introverts love? Being the center of attention. Audience participation. But tonight, don't worry, you can trust me. Some anxious looking faces out there. We're going to start this very easy on you. So I'm going to show you how the audience participation is going to look. And to you, you're going to clap. Okay, so not yet. So this is low. So what I want from you is like just a polite golf clap. Like I'm a pro, not yet, I haven't gestured to you. I hope you read better than that. Okay. Just a polite golf clap. I'm a pro, but I've just sank like a 1 foot putt. Okay? Okay, here, let's try. Okay. Now it would be cheap for me to hold this up high to have you cheer for me, right? Because like obviously I'd just be doing that for my own ego. So I thought we would have a volunteer. So do we have any volunteers? Now I was a teacher, so if you avoid eye contact, I'll probably call on. Any volunteers? Oh, come on, be brave. Thank you. Come forward. Okay, great. So yeah, we've got another sign, and I'm kidding. What's your name? Dira. Everyone, Dira was very brave. She came forward. Excellent. She saved the speech. It wasn't going to work if nobody came forward. We were done. It would have been quick. Okay, so any other? I need another volunteer now. No, actually, it's all right. I got this one. This one will be for me. Just be a few minutes.
Never.
I was recently invited to a book festival at the last minute in the United Arab Emirates. And I was nervous. I had never been to a Muslim country before. And I didn't want to be that ugly American who imposes my culture on other people or expects them to do things my way, right? So we only had a couple of weeks. I read like one book, and then we hopped on the airline and flew over there. Now, when I arrived, everything, I'm here in this other country. I'm like, okay, Brent, I'm a really huggy person. Like, don't hug the Muslim women, Brent. Like they're gonna have different boundaries here. So I get there, I'm very nervous. The first lady I meet is like Molly Weasley. She comes up and she gives me this huge hug, and I'm like, okay, great. This is gonna be all right. I'm gonna be able to figure this out. So it turns out that the book festival is, or at least our portion of it, is run completely by these British expatriate women. We're all incredibly competent, and they just handle things wonderfully well. And they just treat us like family. It's lovely. Everything goes great until the second day. When I meet the assistants, okay? So the assistants are local women, and they are dressed in the abaya and the hijab, right? The faces are uncovered, but everything else is covered. Hair is covered and everything. And they're nice, and I'm talking to them, but I've just been introduced to them, and I realize, like, well, I haven't shaken their hands. I haven't really greeted them. And I've either hugged or shaken hands with all of their bosses. Now, these are the assistants. And I'm like, oh no, I'm in a very status conscious culture, right? And I'm like the visiting celebrity, and I'm a man, and like, it's probably on me. I'm being rude. Oh my goodness. So, I shake their hands. It all seems to go fine until it's over. And then Molly Weasley takes me aside. And she says, Brent, I know you didn't mean to cause offense, but in this culture, men never, ever initiate physical contact. Women get to decide how much contact they are comfortable with. And I'm like, oh no, I did exactly the thing I didn't want to do. Like, I imposed my culture on these women. They couldn't say no without humiliating me. And so I have just been, unwanted physical contact. We have a word for that here. And so in my mind, all 10,000 people in the book festival stopped. And they looked at me and they said, my imagination is way better than that. They said, wow, that stinks. Okay. But Molly wasn't done with me. She said, I've lived here for many years, and I've spoken with many local women, and women here don't feel oppressed. They feel respected. And I thought, yeah, come on. Like, I just walked past, the guy wearing completely Western clothes. He's got a t-shirt on, he's got jeans on, and his wife next to him is covered head to foot, including the eyes. I mean, like, come on. And then I thought, there's something kind of gross about the white guy from America coming in and telling the local women that they don't feel the way they feel. Isn't there? Feels a little squicky. And Molly went on. Wasn't done with me yet. And she said, think about how many meetings you've had that are kind of at the borderland of business and personal. And the men, after the meeting is done, they shake hands if they're friendly. Okay, they shake hands. But then the women kind of feel this pressure, if they're going to be friendly, to hug the guy. What if they don't want to hug the guy? Like, what if they don't even want to, like, ew, they don't even want to shake hands? They pay a price for that in your culture, in American culture. She said, over here, so your culture forces women to do things they don't want to, and this culture empowers women. And that made me feel deeply uncomfortable. And it made me think. Now, at this point, in a well-structured speech, I would give you the thesis statement. You guys know this, you've been to things, you've read books. Then in a while, I would repeat the thesis, and then I would repeat it again as I close. In a really well-structured speech, I would somehow weave my embarrassing story to show how it was actually deeply connected with my theme. I am not going to do that tonight. Why? Because instead I'm going to try something difficult and more interesting. I'm going to trust you, and we'll find out together if this works or not. Now, there are a lot of ways for a writer to start a book. Maybe he thinks of an intriguing line of dialogue, or she thinks of this beautiful image that startles her, or an action sequence, or maybe he's grading a million exams and he's bored and he's hot, blank. And he writes down on the page, in a hole in the ground, there lived a hobbit. And he thinks to himself, what's a hobbit? Now me, I have always been enthralled by the power of story. Now, writers tend to joke that we are paid liars. We write stuff that has never happened. But there was actually a time in Western history where thinkers asked, like, what do we do with fiction and with the theater? This is actually just lies, isn't it? And lies are bad, aren't they? And they actually briefly shut down the theaters during Shakespeare's time for this very reason. He turned out all right. But during that time, there was this poet named Sir Philip Sidney, and he made an impassioned defense of poesy, which is sort of literature and poetry and the theater all bunched together. And he argued, poesy is more true than history. Like, Think of the tyrants in history that you know about who got away with it, who died happy in bed. But if you wrote a story of Adolf Hitler's ending, he wouldn't get to just go out on his own terms without ever having faced justice. You would have to write that differently, or people would be like, this ending sucked, because it doesn't align with what they know has to be true. He said also, poesy is more motivating than philosophy. No one can read Hegel. No one. He's awful. And even out of the great prose stylists like Plato, it's very few people can or do read it. And Sidney argued that it isn't motivating. It doesn't change people's lives. But everyone loves stories. Everyone even structures their own experiences into stories. Whether that's let me tell you the story about this, when this happened, or I had this terrible job, but at least I learned this. We structure our reality into stories. I start every book with a moral problem and a technical challenge. With The Way of Shadows, I asked, how could a basically moral person choose to become an assassin? What kind of situation would they have to find themselves in where that seemed like the right choice? And then over time, what would that do to them? I asked, can children do evil? Now, children all too often suffer evil. We know that. At the time when I was writing that, my wife was working with reactive kids who'd been horrifically abused. And some of them were acting out, and they were abusing other kids. And the abuse, the things that they did to other kids, the way that they victimized other kids, had very real consequences in those other kids' lives. But my question was, if somebody else had done this to these other kids, if some adult had done it, you'd call it evil. Would you call it that when a 6-year-old kid does it? Is that evil? On the technical side, I said, what if magic were more like science? Not in the way you think. Not in that what if magic were less mysterious, but what if magic were more like science and it was more mysterious? When you read The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn, he talks about how scientists would work on a theory for their whole lives, and then it turns out it's wrong. The humoral theory actually works in a lot of cases, and lots of scientific theories that end up falling apart do work in a lot of ways, and then they just fall apart. So people can work on a scientific theory their entire lives and see it all wasted. But somehow, when we deal with magic, in chapter 5, somebody explains how it works, and that actually is exactly how it works. I thought magic can be more interesting than that. Magic should be filtered through what characters realistically could know, how their culture reacts to things, and what they think is okay to do, what their personality is. In Shadow's Edge, I asked, can a warrior change? In a violent world, is pacifism viable? I asked, what would you do to survive? How about if you're starving and desperate and fighting for your life every day? What does cannibalism look like then? Is that different? Technical challenges. Can I get readers to root for a character who has just killed a character they love? Can I develop a character who's already dead? Can I make their life richer, more meaningful, more interesting, deeper? And then, can I resurrect them without it feeling cheap, in a place where sophisticated readers least expect it? In Beyond the Shadows, I asked, is there a difference between a good man and a good king? Can a great king be a good person? I said, why is it okay when states kill, but not when individuals do it? Where does that line blur? Is it when you become a king or a leader? I wasn't asking, does might make right, but rather, does power and responsibility influence what is and isn't moral? I asked, can I take readers along as their friend does more and more evil? A good friend, a good man, does more and more evil, and then surprise them with how long they excuse his evil, simply because he feels bad about it and he feels trapped. When they reread the book, knowing what happens, do they disengage earlier? Might they be a little bit horrified at how long they excused evil? Do you have any friends in real life who've done terrible things, but you ignored it? You averted your eyes because you like them. You don't want to look at that. I'm not going to focus on the Lightbringer series tonight, but there it was questions like, how many corrupt individuals can an institution endure before it becomes a corrupt institution? Are non-corrupt institutions even possible? Oh, and things like, how does one solve the problem of evil? But the questions aren't all big and abstract. I also ask things like, at what point is a parent's job so important to so many people that even if their own family suffers so they can do that job, the family suffering is simply irrelevant? My dad was a heart doctor, and he was a great one. He worked 14-hour days, often 7 days a week, saving lives. The community loved him. People would stop us on the street to tell us how my dad saved their life, or my dad saved their brother's life, or my dad had told their brother, here are your odds, here's your options, and give them dignity in the last years of their life. But I just wanted to play catch. Which is more important? Playing catch or literally saving lives? With Night Angel Nemesis, I started with bigger problems. The main plot problem was as simple as it was difficult. What is an impossible job for the perfect assassin? The moral problem is something I'll let you discover for yourselves. So let me pivot to a couple problems that I can talk about without spoiling anything. When I finished writing the Lightbringer series, I found myself at a crossroads. I finished that series and it had taken me all of my 30s. I tend to write long books and long series. But statistically, as a novelist, at this point, I've probably written half the books I will ever get to write in my life. So, when I started writing in the Night Angel world, I was 19 years old, and I had big dreams. I wanted to write a huge series like a Robert Jordan or George R.R. Martin. And I don't know about you, but I've changed a lot since I was 19. I started writing The Way of Shadows when I was 25. I've changed a lot since then, too. But I've also learned a lot. I've grown as a writer and as a human. So my problem was, do what I jokingly refer to as my ninja books offer me enough artistic freedom to push the boundaries of fantasy? Can I do my best work here in this world? Can I feel fulfilled if I spend the bulk of the rest of my life writing in Midkira? With Night Angel Nemesis, I decided to find out. I tried to blend familiar characters and big action and huge surprises and all the things that you love from the Night Angel trilogy with new storytelling techniques that I think bring added depth and nuance, but also, quite honestly, bring a little bit more difficulty for readers. Now, I attempted to introduce those layers organically to give you a chance to figure out what's going on and to make it make sense, but it is a gamble. Now, for me, it's one that's succeeded. I've certainly shown myself that there's plenty of latitude in this world for me to explore and to grow, and I hope and believe that I can reward readers who come along the journey with me. I think when some of you finish, some of you will say, I need to read that again, like right now. And I think a lot of you will say, I need to talk to someone about what just happened. But what I learned from writing this book was that I won't be writing a big series like Robert Jordan or George Martin. I'll be writing a big series that's all Brent Weeks. The Kakari Codex will have 3 movements. The first movement was the Night Angel trilogy. The second movement, which I foresee having 3 books, will be the Kylar Chronicles. And the third movement will shift again. I have plans. It would be great marketing for me to tell you and try to get you all excited about that. But honestly, we've seen writers overpromise and underdeliver. And honestly, I'd like to do the opposite. Telling stories isn't merely my job. It's how I make sense of the world. I think it's how many of us make sense of the world. I think fiction is meaningful because it takes us out of our own shoes and our own problems. Sometimes even if it's into different problems in a fictional world, that can be a relief. I think fantasy can, at its best, do this better than any other genre because it pulls us the farthest from our own tribal affiliations. It trusts readers the most to go to a new world, learn lessons, and come back and apply them to your own world, your own life. I once ran across the broken glass of Amazon reviews, feeling like I was John McClane in Die Hard, and Hans Gruber was shooting out the window panes. But there, glittering like a diamond amid the broken glass, I found this review that said, "I feel like this book is deeply subversive in some way I can't figure out yet." It felt like the best review ever. He was saying, this book is forming me, but I'm not sure how. Now, it won't be like that for everyone. Not everything is equally subtle to every reader, and not everything is equally agreeable. If I'm taking on lots and lots of thorny problems, as I am, the odds that you'll agree with me on every single one of them is basically zero. And that's okay. Shakespeare believed in the divine right of kings. I still adore Hamlet. Plutarch was a capital S Stoic and a literal priest of Apollo. I still learned tons from his parallel lives. I probably don't see eye to eye with Chuck Palahniuk on plenty of things, but I still loved Fight Club. The famous literary critic Northrop Frye once said, "The critical action begins with reading a work straight through as many times as may be necessary to possess it in totality." That is, reading it over and over until you understand it completely. Now, he was a professional critic, so maybe the bar he sets there is too high for most of us. But he's not saying what you should do is never judge. He says, begin by trying to immerse yourself in the work. Understand, and then judge. When I went to the United Arab Emirates, I had good excuses, but I judged too quickly, and thus poorly. So I acted impolitely. The women there said they feel respected when I thought they probably felt oppressed. Now, I don't have to turn my brain off when somebody says something like that and say, well, they know best. End of story. In fact, on the same trip, I went to the Grand Mosque, and I went with a Black American writer, and she had to cover her hair. She had to cover her shoulders, and it was a hot day. And she said, I have been to multiple Muslim countries and never felt oppressed, and I feel oppressed here. Now, you can put those two statements together from two different groups of women and make it make sense, but it takes a little bit of work. So instead, I hope to listen and to integrate my judgment into something that honors both those women, in this case, and the truth. Now, at the beginning of the talk, I said I was flipping things around. I said I'd be judging you. That's true. I am. But it wasn't all the truth. You've been judging me too. And that is right and good. When I write a book or write a speech, I'm attempting to bring something of value to my community. Tonight, I've trusted you to listen. I didn't dumb down my speech. It had a structure, but I didn't point out every strut and joist. You might have noticed, or see now with hindsight, that I walked you through what I've done, what I'm doing now, and what I plan to do. I walked you through, I talked about the higher purposes I see in fiction. And it even turns out that my initial embarrassing story is deeply connected with my theme, because I talk about snap judgments versus deeply considered ones, and how it's our responsibility as readers to engage with fiction, to ask questions, even as it forms us. But now there's just one fatal flaw with my talk. One loose plot thread. If I stop now, some wise guy will. So at the beginning, you had those signs, and you had this cheer. You never really came back to those. Was that just a fake out about audience participation? Now, part of me would be tempted to talk to that guy, that snarky guy, and be snarky right back and say, oh, give me a hard time, will you? That's all right. You'll get yours in chapter 67. But I'm too kind to say that. And it's not chapter 67 you have to worry about. He's right. A well-structured speech would ultimately somehow incorporate those signs. Darn it. But there's good news. Your judgment is actually the entire point. So, now, as I come to the end of the speech, I want you to judge me. And I'm going to take a vote. You don't get to vote on books, not tonight, but you get to vote on my speech. So I'm going to take a little vote. You can vote for the black sign. And if you win, you get to boo me to your heart's content. Or even if you're just like, I hate being forced into votes, so I'm going to vote for black, you can do that. You can abstain, or you can vote for green. So here we are. Votes for black. Not even one. Thank you. I was hoping for one. I was like, I gotta have a heckler at least. One heckler. All right then, that only leaves us with one terrible option. Everyone, you know what to do. All right now, and I would be delighted to take your questions if you have any questions for me. And then we'll do all the signing business after that. So, yes, in the green.
Any plans to return to the world of Lightbringer?
Do I have any plans to return to the world of Lightbringer? I have distant of plans. I have plenty of plot hooks. Right now, I can only see so far into the future, and so not immediately is what I can say. So yes, there's more stories I would like to tell, and I hope I have the time to do so. So my focus right now is on Night Angel.
So I brought you some fresh meat tonight. He just started Way of Shadows.
Okay, fantastic.
When would be the appropriate time to have him read Perfect Shadow?
Perfect Shadow. I would read Perfect Shadow. So Perfect Shadow happens chronologically. I don't know why I had to do this to people. Well, I do know why I did it, but I won't spoil it for him since after he reads the trilogy.
Okay.
Even though chronologically it happens first. I had to deal with a significant thing that you learn that the main character doesn't learn until the third book. And when I was telling the story of Perfect Shadow, I was like, I needed to either just tell that or somehow go around it. I really couldn't tell the story well without just saying, this is not a secret to the character in this book. So there's no reason for me to keep it secret from the readers, or I couldn't tell it without doing really weird things. So I was just like, we're just going to know this. So, yes. Yes, sir. Black.
Now you've written another trilogy. Is there anything, not trilogy, series? Is there anything you do differently with the Night Angel? You could go back and rewrite it?
Oh, if I could go back to Night Angel and I could rewrite it, is there anything I would do differently? On every single page. Actually, so I had to reread it in order to write this book to make sure I hadn't forgotten things. Very surprised at how much I did remember. A lot of it stuck with me, more than I had expected. But it's a painful experience for me, honestly, because I just would like to tinker. Like, the thing I have to do is I have to tell myself with every single book, because I would happily polish it and make it better for forever, is that if I work on this book forever, with each, like there's this point of diminishing returns. Like, you work on it for another 6 months and you make it, the first 6 months of editing, you make it 50% better. And then the next 6 months, you make it 10% better. And then the next 6 months, you might make it 5% better. And it's like, the longer I do this, the more books I don't get to write in my whole career, the more stories I don't get to tell. So at some point I have to cut it loose. I've grown a lot as a writer. I've probably changed in personality some. So there's things that I think I would do now that would just be objectively better. And then there's things that I would probably do differently, and readers could come to it and say, I liked it the old way. I mean, like, I've heard that from other people, that you can fool yourself that you're always on an upward trajectory, but then there's certain things that capture emotion. It's like, yeah, the pacing on that is fast forward all the time. And that's works great for a lot of people. And now I'm like, well, that doesn't milk all the drama out of that moment. And like, okay, we need to let that breathe a little bit more. I'm still a fairly frenetically paced person as a writer, but it would certainly be longer if I wrote it now. And I think I would probably, there are awkward phrases that I come across or that I heard, and I was like, oh, or I had to listen to it as an audiobook so that I could go through it quickly. And then I was like, oh, the actor messed that up. And I'm like, oh, the actor messed that up because I should have phrased it slightly differently. And then there are times I was just like, oh, the actor messed it up. Like I want to direct things, like I'm great at everything. So yeah, there's a lot I would do differently. I definitely, one of the things I did that I would very much do differently is I cut the third book a little too deeply. They said, these books are too long, you need to cut, 10,000 words or whatever. And I'm like, okay, it's too long. I'll through and I just cut. Ha ha! See, I'm a professional. Cut 20,000 words out of this, and so the final word count for the Night Angel books was 155,000. Strangely enough, exactly 155,000 for the second one. I wasn't trying that, but and then the third one was 170,000. And at first, it was when I first wrote it, it was like 210,000, and then cut. And I was like, it's too long. I got to make it match the others. It'll be weird if the last book is super long. And then in Lightbringer, the last book is super long. And I was sort of like, yeah, that's fine. That's fine. It's like, I didn't think it was fine then. I was like, if I don't cut this, they're going to throw away my contract. Like, I don't know what they're going to do. I can't say no to my editor. So now I know that I can say no to my editor. I explain why I'm saying no when I say no. But yeah, there's lots of things I do differently. Yeah. Yes.
So I'm big fan, long time. I'm really excited. And I was curious because I loved the Return of Night Angel and the Night Angel Nemesis. And I got really excited by the change of voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to specifically say that because I don't want to complain about the change of voice.
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious what motivated that shift in the storytelling from this two-person perspective as opposed to.
Well, I mean, that's part of what I was talking about tonight. Like I always give myself these technical challenges, and one of the technical challenges was much shorter story, and I thought, so the original books were 155,000 words, and then I sort of cheated up longer and longer and longer till my last book was like 400,000 words long. It's 399. It's ridiculous, right? And I thought, you know what? I'm going to write a book quickly. It's just going to be very action focused. I'm just going to work on my fastball. Just going to do all the things I know I can do really, really well. And it'll be short. It'll be like 125,000 words. Be super focused. And one way I'm going to make sure it's super focused is by just having one point of view. And that'll make me be short. And so 125,000 words. I even bet John Scalzi about that. I came in just right at 315,000 words. So I was proud of myself for that. That's real growth there, Brent. The fact is, I wanted to see how that worked for me. I wanted to see how can I run into the challenges of like, you only know what this person knows, or what this point of view knows. But then there's some games you can play with that, and then the reader can start asking those questions that, like, okay, this is obviously being written down. There's some questions. I don't want to spoon feed it to you, but as you read it, or then as you reread it, you start asking, like, how much of this is true, and how much of this has been tweaked a little bit, and how do I feel about that, and can I divine what is actually happening when there's places where the character wants to cover that up a little bit. So it adds a layer of places for readers to go with it. Like I still wanted it to be a very smooth reading experience where if you don't get all those layers, you can still get it. And it's a story that works and it's fun and it's fast and it's forward. But I wanted you to be able to ask new questions. And I wanted to stretch as a writer. Can I fully immerse myself in Kylar in a way that's new and different and deep? And then have these questions come out with then I introduce a frame story, but not at the beginning. I thought this is more interesting to have a frame not be entirely framing the story, and then to play some games with that. So I thought it would be hard. I thought it'd be a good exercise for me as a writer, and I thought then I could do some good things with it. So that's why I initially started it. I initially did think it would help me write a short book, and I just started adding complications to it because that's what I do apparently as a human and as a writer. So.
So what were the terms of the bet?
Yeah, well, we're writers, so it was $5. It hurt me a lot. Put that $5 in the mail. So yeah, I mean we bet this like 7 years ago because he was mocking me. He's like, "You epic fantasy writers, you can't write a short book," and I'm like, "Yes, we can. Yes, we can. I'm a very disciplined writer. I try new technical challenges with every book that I do, and I can do it." So I was determined. I was going to make it be 124,000 words and 999 words. I was going to just be like, I got it. So I failed. I really wanted to cut it in half. Like I could cut it for $5. I was just like, I hate this. So I lost. Yes. Yes, it is.
Is he your favorite character? Inspiration from the character? What was kind of the why are you
Um,
on Instagram?
Well, because I got to Instagram late and everybody had taken all my names, so it's really annoying.
Nobody wanted to be
Nobody wanted to be Andros Gallagher, so I don't know why. Such a nice guy, trying to do the right thing all the time. I once sort of joked that people ask me which character I identify with most, and I said, well, obviously Mama K. I mean, look at me. It's a little bit. They have some similarities in that people end up doing the things that they want them to do most of the time, and that's sort of like me with my characters. They end up doing what I want them to do most of the time, but sometimes I have to really manipulate them or back them into corners or twist the screws in various ways. And so it was just sort of, and I'm like, no, he's going to follow me on Instagram anyway, so I probably won't use this, so I'll just put that in there. So I panicked, like, what do I do? So that's a good question. So the inspiration for Andros Gallagher is in this room. So I don't usually use humans as inspiration, like real people. But my wife pointed this out to me, is that when I would read Andros Gallagher's lines, because I was reading the lines out loud to make sure they sound right. She's like, "You're doing the voice." And I was like, "Oh, which voice am I doing?" She's like, "You're doing your brother's voice." You're doing the Kevin voice. And so Kevin is here tonight, everyone. I've lost control of my audience. Andros Gallagher, I am not, clearly. Thank you. Other questions? Yes.
I haven't started Nemesis yet, but will we still see some of those beloved characters from the Night Angel trilogy?
Yes, you will. So the ones who make it all the way through have a good chance of. I don't know how far you are in the Night Angel trilogy. So
Only the 8th read through it.
Okay. Some characters definitely show up, and you see a lot of them, and some characters don't show up at all yet. I mean, partly because I was trying to keep this focused, and it's because I don't have so many points of view. So it's starting, with Kylar, and it's like, well, who does he see, and where does he go while he's off on this, while he's on a mission. So there are characters who don't show up, and I thought I was trying to write, even though it is a huge book, there's a lot of pages. It is a very focused narrative. So there's things that it's not about. There are things that are happening in the world that this is not about, and that's part of doing a first person point of view. It's like stuff is happening. He's not there. It's still going on. So can I bring those things in and tie those in and tell this story in this epic world where lots of things are still happening and moving and changing? And that's actually one of the things I'm working on now as I work on the next book, while still staying, in somebody's head. So some characters show up that you're hoping, and some don't. So, or at least I don't know you, so I don't know who you hope is going to show up. But then I think fans will be excited to see. I had the thought too. Also, I tried to write it so that it is a place you can start. So when I picked up this was one of the actually most significant technical challenges of writing the book. Is there will be readers who have finished the Night Angel trilogy 15 years ago, and we're like, that was great. I remember really liking that. Oh, there's a new one. I want to read the new one, and just are like, I can't do a reread right now. So they will dive in, and they will barely remember anything except maybe some character names. So I wanted it to work for those readers. And then there will be readers who reread, like right before this book comes out, or read it for the first time, and then they pick it up, and they don't want a big lecture on page 2. Like, oh, there's the clumsy way. There's a big initial action sequence, and then you sit down with a character who's like, hey, so you remember that war we had yesterday? Remember how Joe died, and wasn't that tragic? And we wept for, and then they sort of spell it all out, and you're like, oh, it's so boring to get the whole info dump, right? So, and I also wanted it to work for entirely new readers who hadn't read anything, because part of me is like, I'm a better writer now. Don't read that stuff from before. It's embarrassing. Come on, read me now. I'm better. I'm good. Look, check this out. Isn't everybody a little bit embarrassed of old themselves? I mean, maybe not everybody, but I am sometimes. So I wanted to work for 3 entirely different groups of people who would remember different amounts of things. And so the way I handled the exposition, that is just like filling you in on the world and the story thus far, was like something I wanted to do as we move forward. And that's technically really difficult, but I hope it's completely invisible to you, because you're like, oh yeah, now I remember that person. Oh yeah, that was the thing that happened. And you just pick it up as you go along without realizing that I had to put that in there really carefully so that it wasn't boring, so it was interesting. And we have little tricks for doing that now I know, because I've been writing for a while. So other questions? Yes.
When you go back through your older books, do you ever picture certain people as the characters that you created?
Generally, I do ever picture certain actors or something as the characters that I created, or people as the characters that I created. Very rarely. I remember, usually I'll take little pieces from people. So I remember thinking, okay, when he's older, significantly older, Hugh Jackman could be a Durzo, right? Because Hugh Jackman, the thing that I liked about Hugh Jackman was he has these moments where he's scary, and you're like, oh my god, like he does that thing with as Wolverine, where he turns around and he almost kills the cat, and you're like, oh my god, he's so potently dangerous, and I like that. I like that thing about him. There's something about a really scary dude that Hugh Jackman can do, and some guys can't do it. You got some affable guy playing Durzo, it just is not going to work. It's just he's not an affable dude. But mostly I've been look, it took Tolkien signed over the film rights in 1969. And how long did it take for there to be a movie made? Yeah.
They did an animated version.
Yeah, well, yes,
Yeah.
right.
There's really selling the rights for it.
Right. But I mean, the point is, when you're trying to get something made with Hollywood, it's things are going to change, and all the actors are going to be different by the time you get it going. So I've just been Hollywood, it's the land of heartbreak and terrible stories. So we'll stay out of that place. So. Yes. How are we doing on time? Okay. Maybe one last question. Yes, sir.
You're speaking a lot about judgment. Is there a judgment that you're going to take from the audience about the book and incorporate it into future books?
I don't listen to audiences at all. I'm an artist. I'm on my ivory tower. There are places. I think there are. We have this Western concept that we've had since the Romantic era, and that is artist as genius. Thing that we have, and we did not have it until the Romantic era. And before then, it was like artists they're artisans. They're guys who are good at their job. And so the thing of artist as genius is artists really love buying into it because it makes them unquestionable, and that's really nice. And then it's also actually really hard to break out of that, because if you say, well, I'm not a genius, then everybody says, oh, he's not a genius. He must suck. So it's like, I question the whole, I think you can be a fantastic artist and be really great at things, and also be a guy or a woman who works at your job, who learns, who gets some things wrong, who needs to up their game in certain places. I sort of have this growth mentality. Like, there's things I would do differently if I had another chance. And there's things tomorrow I'll do differently. And I think that, and I think I can admit that, because actually I think I'm pretty darn good at my job. And I don't need you to think like everything Brent does is so great because he's such a genius, and I'm in this protected category. So I completely wandered away from the point at the beginning, and I'm just going to admit that. But I like to grow as an artist, and what was the question? Because I really do want to come around to it, because there was a way I was tying that back in.
It was
Taking judgment for rights. Oh yeah, okay, so thank you. So like one of the things that matters in fantasy is, or in any book, is when you're going along, it's like, how are readers receiving this? So I talked about exposition. I talked about putting information in your head. It's like how you're actually receiving that information matters, and it doesn't always work perfectly. So like, I introduced a character early in Lightbringer who I thought, okay, she's a young girl, she's getting a raw deal. I was very forgiving of her, and I thought other people would be too. And people were like, we hate her. We hate her. And I was like, hold on, well, why do they hate her? I was like, they hated her because they didn't know her as well as I did. And they didn't know as well as I did because, well, they didn't know all the parts about her that weren't on the page. And then the way that you introduce people to a character really, really matters. Like, first impressions matter a ton. So if you want to show somebody and they're a great person, you need to show them, like Hollywood says, saving a cat. Like, you see them in a moment where they're doing something good. And if the first thing they're doing is good, then you're like, that's a good person. Even if they're jerky later, I have some hope for them. They're going to do good. And so I was like, you know what? I introduced that character not the way that I was hoping. And so readers were in a different place than they needed to be for me to use her to evoke the emotions I wanted readers to have later. So it was like, this tool was fine, but it's not working on this job. So I need to either do some things differently in the future to pick that character up. And if I want them to work this way that I'd originally intended, I need to really work on that. Or I need to go, okay, this is how readers are treating this character. This is how a lot of readers, anyway, not every reader. This is how a lot of readers feel about this character. And now I can use her with where she is. So this became like, the Bob Ross happy accident. Like, I didn't mean to do that, but now that it's there, can I make that work? And I did. And I was Liv, and I used her for other things. And she worked really well with what I needed to do, and with what I'd already written, and with what readers had received. So I made a mistake, and I changed what I was going to do based on what I was seeing a lot of readers say. There's times when readers just like say stuff, and I'm like, you're wrong. or okay, you're reacting against something else in your life, and you don't like this for reasons that are perfectly valid, and that's fine. But like I said, when I take on a bunch of different issues and put them forward, I'm gonna hit some hot buttons for people, and they're gonna say, nope, I do not like that at all. Like, somebody read my books, they said, you had slavery in this book. I was done with it. Didn't matter how I depicted slavery. It was like, that is such a hot button for me. I'm done with it. It's like, okay, that's fine. So there's times like, but in history, there's been a lot of slavery, and I think slavery is not just the way it's been in the American South. There's been lots of different kinds of it, and there's still slavery, and it is interestingly corrupting in the way that it shows. It was a really nice way to show blind spots in a book in a series that was all about series that was all about perception. It's like the main character, who's some pretty moral guy who's trying to do right things, has this complete blind spot that is super obvious to us. It's like, how can you think slavery is okay, dude? Everybody around him thinks slavery is fine. This is normal. This is what happens. This is how the world works. How could your world work without this? Economically, it's needed. Who's going to do certain yucky jobs if you don't have slaves do them? Like, it makes sense to his world. So to us, we look at it and we go, well, how could you be blind to that? And I'm hoping you say, are there any things in my world that I'm blind to that I don't see? So I change. I look at what the audience is receiving. Sometimes they say stuff that's perfectly valid, and I say that's great. This is just not the book for you. That's okay. Sometimes I think you're a terrible reader. That does happen. And sometimes I listen and change. So, guys, it is a huge privilege to get to co-create with you these stories, because I put it on the page, but the way you put it together, I really think that readers bring it alive in your imagination. You fill out the gaps. I make a blueprint, and it's so lovely to me to see that we build something in your heads together that's awesome and wonderful and has life. So I appreciate that I get to do this work with you, in you, and I appreciate that you guys let me keep doing this job. So thank you so much.